Thank you so much. I've been thinking about this a lot lately about the whole, in general, not only social entrepreneurship, but the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem in general, and the entrepreneurship programs specifically. We're seeing a lot of, incubators, accelerators. Well, I'm not against that, and I'm also a startup mentor. But I'm also noticing that we're not able to move the needle as much when we're running those programs. And I feel like what worked 10 years ago should change now. It shouldn't be working right now. Things are changing. We're
Yeah.
seeing, you can build the likes of Uber and Airbnb in a matter of minutes using vibe coding, for example. And like the tools are different. So I feel from my perspective, it's that the entrepreneurship scene is still stuck globally, not just in a specific region, but globally, still stuck in a place where, we're still running 6 months of accelerator programs or I don't know, 3 months of incubation programs. And I know that you have a rich experience in this space. What can you tell us about that, and how is it evolving, and how what were you doing in that space? How did you notice that we could change things in certain areas to improve those programs?
Sure. So, for context, in my background working in ecosystem enablers, what is what I call them, incubators, accelerators, early stage funders, these types of things. I started out working as a community manager with the first women-led tech accelerator program in the region. Then I moved to a marketing manager position, so I've seen the sourcing and deal flow process for accelerators with these large accelerator operators in the world that basically work with governments and private sector to be able to accelerate the innovation that they want to have. But I didn't really like those models. I think they were often copy and paste. I will say the larger operators would be better off hiring local talent to really be able to adapt their models rather than just try to run at speed.
Mm,
Um, and that was sort of the mandate was challenging because there's also pressures from donors and partners on the accelerator side. So I actually wanted to shift more and understand what it was like to work at a local ecosystem
mm,
level. How do you really catalyze small ecosystems to really have transformational change? And I had the opportunity to do that in 2020 by moving from Dubai to Baltimore, Maryland, which, for those who don't know, is about an hour north of Washington, D.C. It is a city that is trying to label itself now as an equitech city, but it is a city that has some of the most challenging aspects of American disparities in one center. And so the role I had was working with Johns Hopkins University on what's called a social innovation lab. But it was unique because it brought the resources of Johns Hopkins and students and faculty led ventures with the community. And so the community was often, actually, most of the ventures I worked with were Black female led ventures that were solving diverse challenges in the community, from connectivity to healthcare to uh, countering gun violence, education. And so it was a really cool opportunity for me to enter an ecosystem and see how they were really rallying around these entrepreneurs to be able to support them. But they also were very transparent about the challenges that were happening at the city level. So one of the things I appreciated about my time in Baltimore was I really learned how to advocate and question bias. So even from the city level, they were looking at procurement processes. Like, a lot of the times, certain people who were in the know would be able to bid on city projects, which meant that people who might be potentially eligible but not in the know were not being considered. Or there was this concept in Baltimore called Share the Sugar, where certain foundations were funding early stage entrepreneurs to be able to combine resources in difficult times. So, for example, they could have a shared resource like a marketing or fundraising person to help them be able to amplify their message, shared office space, shared back end resources, and also joint messaging. And so I learned a lot from entrepreneurs in local ecosystems. But the reality is, local ecosystems globally struggle, right? You try to label yourself, you try to attract
yeah,
yourself,
yeah.
and that's one thing we're going to continue to see overall. And so having success stories is really important to tell about an
Mm.
ecosystem. But then I decided to kind of exit the accelerator space. I'd been running entrepreneur programs for a while, and I really wanted to understand from a systemic level, from a fund perspective, how do you work, catalyze entrepreneurship globally? And I had the ability to work with UNICEF Venture Fund for 3 years, where I worked with entrepreneurs building AI and blockchain solutions for health, supply chain, climate globally. And I will say, in these roles, both Johns Hopkins and at UNICEF Venture Fund, I saw the same trends globally with entrepreneurs. There's not enough funding to bridge that gap between I have a proof of concept and I now need to pilot it and get the evidence needed to then be eligible for that next layer of funding. So there's a gap there,
Yeah.
both from the ecosystem perspective to be able to help entrepreneurs. But then there's also that I've raised seed funding and now I really need to scale, and how do I get that capital to do so? So there's kind of two funding gaps that I'm seeing, at least the early stage, and I'm considering like seed in this early stage as well, of like getting to the seed place and then also getting from seed to, you know, what you might consider a Series A, Series B, Series C. But I will say, this is talking in the for-profit space,
Yeah.
right? There are also social entrepreneurs that might have different business models, like nonprofits. And I would, this is probably controversial, but I would put nonprofits as social entrepreneurs. It really depends on the regulatory space you're in. So we see nonprofits in the global ecosystem, particularly in emerging markets, that are operating under a nonprofit model because there's not a social enterprise model. And the role of philanthropy has been very critical in supporting that early stage growth. So unfortunately, though, we're seeing a lot of that cut in the last 2 years. There was a 9% dip in overseas development assistance last year, and that's going to raise to potentially 17% this year.